The Secret Beneath the Ice. A true story from Arctic Greenland. Part 1. The Discovery. The wind had stopped. After 3 days of howling gales that kept every boat in Ilulissat harbor locked to its mooring, the sudden silence was almost unnerving. Pele Blitman stood on the deck of his small fishing vessel, hands deep in his pockets, watching the icebergs drift past in the pre-dawn darkness. At 53, he'd been fishing these waters since he was a child, since age 16, when fishing became his profession. Before that, he'd traveled the pack ice by dog sled from Ilimanak, fishing through holes chopped in the frozen sea. But this morning felt different. "You coming or what?" Joel Hansen appeared from below deck, younger by 20 years but every bit as weathered. Joel had left carpentry behind in 2009, trading wood shavings for the freedom of the sea. "When I was a carpenter, I worked 10 hours a day," he often said. "Now we might go out for 3 days straight, but that's freedom." They cast off just as the first grey light touched the horizon. The fjord was unusually calm, the water black as obsidian between the white monuments of ice. Pele steered the boat north, toward the outer reaches of Disco Bay where the halibut ran deep. 2 hours out, something caught his eye. "Joel, come look at this." Beneath the boat, visible through the crystalline Arctic water, was a shadow. Not the shadow of an iceberg, those were obvious, predictable. This was different. A long, straight line running along the seafloor, too geometric to be natural. "Probably just a shipping container," Joel said. "Fell off some cargo ship." But Pele wasn't convinced. He'd learned his trade through his eyes, watching the fishermen of his childhood, learning one trick after another. His instincts had kept him alive on these waters for nearly 4 decades. And his instincts told him this was something else entirely. They dropped their long lines and waited. It took about 2 hours, then they sailed back, a 4-hour round trip. When they hauled in the lines, there were catfish and several halibut, but Pele couldn't stop thinking about what he'd seen. "We're going back tomorrow," he told Joel. "And bring the underwater camera." Part 2. The Kivitok's Warning. That night in Ilulissat, over plates of dried cod and mugs of coffee at the harbour gatehouse, Pele asked the old-timers about unusual structures in the outer fjords. Most laughed him off. A few got quiet. Finally, an elder named Rasmus leaned forward. He was one of the few who still remembered the old ways, who still spoke of things the younger generation dismissed as superstition. "You saw something near Kangaluk?" he asked quietly. Pele nodded. Rasmus was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "My grandfather used to say there were places in the fjords that belonged to the Kivitok, the mountain wanderers who left society to live in the wild." The others at the table shifted uncomfortably. The Kivitok were wandering spirits, people who chose exile or were forced into the wilderness. It was believed they turned into spirits, as they could not survive Greenland's harsh climate. Some said they gained supernatural strength, learned to speak with animals, and harbored revenge against those who wronged them. "Just stories," Joel muttered, but he didn't sound convinced. "Stories have truth in them," Rasmus said. He looked directly at Pele. "Some villages have legends of Kivitok living in caves nearby. Many will never walk alone through areas where a Kivitok is supposed to live." "We're fishermen," Pele said firmly, "not afraid of ghosts." But that night, lying in his small cabin on the boat, he couldn't sleep. Through the porthole, he could see the northern lights dancing across the sky, green and shimmering, said by ancient Greenlanders to be ancestors playing football with a walrus skull. He thought about the old legends. About Sedna, the mother of the sea, whose fingers became seals and fish when her father threw her overboard and cut them off as she tried to climb back into the boat. The legend said that when hunters and fishermen got too greedy and took more than they needed, Sedna trapped the animals in her long hair to teach them a lesson. Were they being greedy by investigating this thing? Or was it something else calling to them? Part 3. What Lies Beneath. They returned to the spot at dawn with the underwater camera. The water was even calmer than before, as if the sea itself was holding its breath. The camera revealed what Pele had suspected. This was no shipping container. It was a structure, deliberately built, partially buried in sediment. Made of stone or concrete, with what looked like metal reinforcements. And it was old. Very old. What the hell is this? Joel breathed. Pele knew enough history to make an educated guess. During World War II and the Cold War, Greenland had been strategically vital. Camp Century, established in 1959 about 140 miles inland, was ostensibly a research outpost but was actually a secret military installation. The Americans had wanted to hide missiles beneath the ice, creating underground railways that would cover an area as large as Alabama. But this structure was underwater, not under ice. And it looked even older than the 1950s. Could it be from the Norse? Joel suggested. Pele shook his head. The Norse settlements had collapsed centuries ago, sometime in the 14th or 15th century. They'd simply vanished, leaving behind farms with valuable items still inside, suggesting they didn't evacuate but rather starved. But the Norse had been inland farmers, not deep-sea builders. This was something else. Over the next week, Pele and Joel explored the structure carefully. They told no one else, not yet. Pele was the elected representative of the Fishermen's Association, always ready to help his members, but he knew this discovery needed to be understood before it was announced. What they found was astonishing. The structure was a network of chambers, connected by passages. Some were collapsed, filled with sediment and sea life. But others were intact, sealed by doors that had long since rusted away. Inside, preserved by the cold Arctic water, were artifacts. Papers, too degraded to read. Metal tools of unknown purpose. And maps, actual maps, sealed in waterproof containers, showing coastlines that didn't match modern Greenland. Scientists had long known that Greenland's ice sheet hid a complex landscape of canyons, mountains, and even lakes. Ancient topography from before the ice covered everything. But these maps showed Greenland as it appeared thousands of years ago, with less ice, more exposed land, different fjords. Who made these? Joel asked, his voice echoing strangely in the small chamber. Pele didn't answer. He was staring at a carving on one of the walls. It depicted figures that looked human but weren't quite right. Too tall, too thin. Around them were what appeared to be marine animals. Seals, whales, narwhals. And above them all, a woman with her hands outstretched. Sedna, the mother of the sea. Part 4, The Ice Remembers. Climate change had been happening quickly in Greenland. The Greenland ice sheet had shed around 270 billion metric tons of ice annually since 2002. The sea ice that once formed year-round was now seasonal, unpredictable. Greenlanders had noticed the migration patterns of key marine life, seals, narwhals, and beluga whales, change because of melting sea ice. But Pele began to wonder, what else was the melting ice revealing? He consulted with researchers from the university in Nuuk. They were fascinated by his discovery but cautious. One scientist, Dr. Nortoft, examined the photographs and video footage Pele had collected. This could be pre-Inuit, she said carefully, before the Thule people migrated to Greenland in the 9th century. Or it could be something we don't have any record of at all. Why would anyone build underwater? Joel asked. They didn't, Dr. Nortoft explained. Sea levels have risen and fallen dramatically over thousands of years. During the last ice age, sea levels were much lower. This site could have been on dry land, or at least much shallower water, when it was built. Pele thought about this. Greenland's glacier kept track of climate and history, locking the past within the ice. Researchers had discovered they could measure temperature and density in ancient ice cores to learn what Earth's climate had been like thousands of years ago. The ice remembered. And now, as it melted, it was releasing its secrets. Part 5. The shamans knew. Pele returned to Rasmus, the old man who had warned him about the Kivitok. This time, he shared what he'd found. Rasmus listened in silence. When Pele finished, the old man nodded slowly. The Angakok knew, he said. The Angakok, the shamans, were intermediaries between humans and the spirit world, protectors of the community. Knew what? That we are not the first people here. That the ice hides more than mountains and lakes. Rasmus pulled out a weathered notebook, filled with drawings and writings in both Greenlandic and Danish. My grandfather was training to be an Angakok before the missionaries came. He wrote down the old knowledge, the things the elders whispered about. He showed Pele a page with a drawing remarkably similar to what they'd found underwater. Next to it was text describing the places before the ice, where the first mothers lived before Sedna. According to legend, the earth was supported by pillars and rested on top of an underworld, which could be reached through entrances in the sea or mountain clefts. What if those weren't just metaphors? What if the ancestors had actually known about these structures? The shamans could travel between worlds, Rasmus explained. They knew things that seemed impossible. Maybe they knew because they remembered. Because the knowledge was passed down from a time before the ice. Joel, who had been skeptical of all the mystical talk, spoke up. But why keep it secret? Because, Rasmus said quietly, some knowledge is dangerous. The Kivitok leaves society when society fails them. But the truly old knowledge, the knowledge of the time before, that's something different. That's about survival. About respecting the sea and the ice and taking only what you need. Part 6. The Decision. Word of their discovery had begun to spread despite their attempts at secrecy. Scientists wanted to excavate. The government wanted to claim it. Foreign universities were offering funding. Mining companies were suddenly interested in the area. Climate change was creating opportunities, as former Prime Minister Kupik Kleist explained, but it was also creating conflicts. Small fishermen like Pele were struggling against larger commercial interests. The frustration small fishermen felt was nothing new. It had always been small fishermen fighting the big ones. But this was different. This wasn't just about fishing quotas or licenses. This was about Greenland's past, and maybe its future. Joel remembered being stuck in the ice once, taking 18 hours to reach port even though he wasn't very far away. The ice could trap you. The ice could kill you. But the ice also protected things. Preserved them. What do we do? He asked Pele one evening as they sat on the deck, watching another sunset that barely dipped below the horizon in the Arctic summer. Pele was quiet for a long time. He'd always felt free at work on the water. The sea had given him everything, his livelihood, his identity, his purpose. And now it had given him this secret. We tell the truth, he finally said. But we make sure it's told right. Not by corporations or governments first. By us. By Greenlanders. We document everything ourselves. We involve the local communities. We make sure whatever happens next, it happens on our terms. The Natural Resource Council of Attu had been created to strengthen the involvement of local hunters and fishermen in monitoring and managing living resources. They met quarterly to discuss observations and compare them with previous years, doing what their forefathers had done for more than 4,000 years. That was the model. Local knowledge. Local control. The old ways and the new ways working together. Part 7. The Secret Keepers. 3 months later, a small team assembled in Ilulissat. Pele and Joel, Dr. Nortoft and her colleagues, representatives from the self-rule government, and, most importantly, elders from communities up and down the coast. They documented the site carefully. They recovered artifacts that could be safely removed. They left others in place, protected and marked. They worked with archaeologists to date the materials. The structure was approximately 8,000 to 10,000 years old, from a period when the climate was warmer and sea levels were different. The people who built it? Unknown. Pre-Inuit? Certainly. Possibly related to earlier migration waves across the Arctic, or possibly something else entirely. The genetic and cultural trails had gone cold millennia ago. But what they'd built remained, a testament to human ingenuity, to adaptation, to survival in one of Earth's harshest environments. The announcement made international news, but Greenland kept control of the site. It became a protected historical location, accessible only to approved researchers and, occasionally, to groups of young Greenlanders learning about their island's deep past. On a small island outside the capital, a group of youth and elders had begun meeting to exchange stories. Elders taught the children how to build fires and prepare traditional food, while the children taught the elders how to adjust their smartwatches. This was how culture survived, by adapting, by remembering, by teaching. Now they had a new story to tell. A new piece of their history. The fisherman's wisdom. Nikulart Jeremiasson, who at age 6 had held fishing nets on his father's boat, was now the chairman of Greenland's Fishermen and Hunters Association. When asked about Pele and Joel's discovery, he smiled. "It doesn't surprise me," he said. "The ice has been here longer than we have. The sea has been here even longer. Our ancestors knew things we've forgotten. And as the ice melts, we remember again." He paused, looking out over the harbor where boats bobbed in the midnight sun. "Greenlanders are used to the weather determining what we can do. That's a condition of life in the Arctic. But some changes might happen faster than traditions change. The challenge," he explained, "was to adapt without losing who they were. To embrace change without forgetting the old knowledge. To take advantage of new opportunities without repeating the mistakes of greed that the legends warned against." In Greenlandic cuisine, traditional Inuit ingredients were being married with flavors brought by immigrants, adaptation and preservation working together. Maybe the same approach could work for everything else. New technology with old wisdom, modern science with ancient knowledge, progress with respect. Pele Blitman still fishes the waters of Disco Bay. Most days, he and Joel catch catfish and halibut, just as they always have. They wear warm clothes because it's cold out there, and every knot faster makes the temperature feel half a degree colder. But sometimes, when the water is especially clear and the icebergs drift past like ancient sentinels, Pele thinks about what else might be hidden beneath the surface. What other secrets the ice might be keeping. What other stories the sea might be ready to tell. The Kivitok, the wandering spirits, were said to learn the secrets of the wild during their isolation. But maybe it wasn't isolation that revealed secrets. Maybe it was attention. Maybe it was respect. Maybe it was the simple act of looking carefully at the world around you and listening to what it had to say. The sled dogs, bred specifically for Arctic work, had an intuitive ability to judge the thickness of sea ice. They knew things humans had to learn. Just as the ancestors had known things about their land that modern Greenlanders were only beginning to rediscover. The ice was melting. The secrets were emerging. And fishermen like Pele, men who spent their lives reading the water, understanding the weather, respecting the power of nature, they were the ones who would find them. Not because they were looking for glory or profit, but because they paid attention. Because they remembered the old stories. Because they understood that in Greenland, the line between past and present, between myth and reality, between the ice and what lay beneath, was thinner than anywhere else on Earth. The sea, as it always had, kept its secrets close. But to those willing to listen, to those who treated it with respect, who took only what they needed, who honored the wisdom of their ancestors, the sea was finally beginning to speak. Based on true accounts of fishermen in Arctic Greenland and the ongoing discoveries being revealed by climate change in the Arctic. While the underwater structure in this story is fictionalized, it draws on real archaeological mysteries, Inuit legends, and the documented experiences of Greenlandic fishermen adapting to their changing world. If you liked the fisherman's story, hit the like button, subscribe for more, and share this story with your friends.